For context, I recently bought an old house built in the 1920s. It's got a ton of character creaky floors, vintage fixtures, the works. The previous owner, an elderly lady named Mrs. Fletcher, had lived there her entire life. She passed away a couple of years ago, and her family sold the house to me. So, last Saturday, I decided to tackle some much-needed cleaning in the basement. It's a pretty standard basement, concrete floors, a few support beams, and lots of cobwebs. I was moving some old boxes when I noticed a section of the wall that looked off. The bricks were a slightly different color, like they didn't quite match the rest of the wall. Curiosity piqued. I gave the wall a few experimental knocks. To my surprise, it sounded hollow. That's when I remembered my dad's old toolbox in the garage. Armed with a hammer and chisel, I started carefully chipping away at the odd section of the wall. After about an hour of work, I uncovered a small wooden door, hidden behind the bricks. The door was about 4 feet high, almost like something out of a fairy tale. It had an antique brass handle and hinges that looked ancient. Heart pounding with excitement, and a bit of fear, to be honest, I turned the handle and pulled the door open. The hinges creaked loudly, and a musty smell hit me. I shone my flashlight into the darkness and saw a narrow staircase leading down into the earth. I contemplated calling someone, a friend, the cops, anyone, but decided against it. This was my discovery, after all. So I took a deep breath and descended the stairs, which seemed to go on forever. At the bottom, I found myself in a small, stone-walled room. It was cold and damp, but otherwise unremarkable, except for one thing: an old wooden chest sitting in the center of the room. I approached the chest cautiously. It was covered in dust and cobwebs, with intricate carvings on the lid. It looked like it hadn't been touched in decades, maybe longer. My hands were shaking as I opened it, half expecting to find a skeleton or something equally terrifying. Instead, the chest was filled with old documents, photographs, and a few personal items, all belonging to Mrs. Fletcher's family. There were letters dated back to the 1930s, black and white photos of people in vintage clothing, and even a diary. It was like a time capsule, preserving a slice of history. The most intriguing item, though, was a small, velvet-lined box at the bottom of the chest. Inside was a beautiful, ornate locket. It was made of gold, with intricate filigree work and a tiny portrait of a young woman inside. I'm guessing it was a family heirloom, passed down through generations. I spent the rest of the weekend poring over the documents and photos. It felt like I was getting to know Mrs. Fletcher and her family in a deeply personal way. I even found out that the house had originally been built by her grandfather, which explained why everything felt so old and storied. I'm planning to contact Mrs. Fletcher's family and return the items to them. They deserve to have these precious memories back. But I wanted to share this incredible experience with you all first. Has anyone else ever found something like this in their home? What did you do with it? I'd love to hear your stories.